The most ignored student in the entire school becomes friends with one of the most popular girls, and she will do everything possible so that he does not go unnoticed. Prepare your notebooks, your student notebook, and your handkerchiefs. It's time to enter the world of Kubo san wa Mabwa Yurasanai. Chapter 1. Shiraishi is a young man who, unlike the rest of his classmates, cannot live a normal adolescence, since he seems to be invisible to everyone. His teachers do not notice him even though he is behind them. His classmates fail to notice his presence even in the class group photos. The only one who seems to notice him and even communicates with him is his classmate Kubo, a purple-haired girl who is next to him in class. A good student, athletic and popular, which is why our protagonist considers that they are from totally different worlds. However, she doesn't seem to care, as she not only talks to him but also plays pranks on him and acts like they are true friends. In class, the girl asks Shiraishi how invisible he is to others, and they both conclude that if he stood in front of the class, they might notice him. Despite Shiraishi's refusal to prove this theory, since he is not very happy about the idea of embarrassing himself in front of his classmates, Kubo manipulates him into accepting, since the girl has taken a shameful photo of our protagonist. Left with no choice, Shiraishi slowly stands up in front of the class, and they only seem to notice him towards the end after he does a pirouette and is scolded by the teacher. Seeing this situation, Kubo laughs at his friend. However, seeing Shiraishi's seriousness, Kubo asks him if he was mad at her for embarrassing him, and he says no. So the girl insists on continuing to do these little tests so that little by little her friend becomes the protagonist of the class. But at this, Shiraishi does respond a little annoyed and calls her a cruel villain. However, instead of getting angry, she throws a little tantrum and tries to convince him to call her his heroine, but our protagonist tells her that he will never call her that. Before things get awkward, Kubo's friends call her to go to another class and she leaves. On the way, her friends tell Kubo that it has been an unprecedented day because they have managed to see Shiraishi twice in one class. The girl seizes the moment to say that maybe Shiraishi is special, like a four-leaf clover, but instead, her classmates reply that she is more like cryptids like Kappa with her ability not to be found. They even remember that time a classmate didn't see Shiraishi for a whole year. They also admit that before they thought that our protagonist was skipping class and being lazy, but they were surprised when they saw that he hadn't missed a single class all year. Then excited, the girls say that Shiraishi has some kind of invisibility superpower. After school, Shiraishi returns home and admits that although he is not the protagonist of adolescence, he has his own reasons for living because he loves reading manga. The next day, Kubo shows up in front of Shiraishi in class and seems to be angry but doesn't tell Shiraishi why. When he asks what's going on, Kubo gets cryptic and reminds our protagonist of everything he's done so far to find out what's going on. Then, the boy comments that he has gone to buy his lunch at the supermarket and, as usual, the saleswoman did not see him even though he was in front of her. Later, in the schoolyard, Shiraishi thought that Kubo was waving at him when he was actually just waving at his friend behind him, so he decides to leave. And that's it. Hearing this, Kubo is enraged and tells him that for not noticing now he will have to be punished, surprising Shiraishi who doesn't understand what he is talking about. So Kubo sits on top of our main character to show that no one would notice that this is happening, because being invisible everyone believes that the seat is empty. He then scolds him, saying that when someone greets him, he should wave back, clearly referencing the situation in the schoolyard. But he can't understand, and he just gets scared and hides. A while later, Kubo continues to play with Shiraishi who doesn't know what to answer, but she has fun at his expense. Later, Kubo asks our protagonist why every class talks to the teacher to ask him questions, to which he replies that it's the only way for the teacher to notice him and see that he is present in class. The other option, which he always did until a while ago, was to shout his name while they were taking roll, but that way he always looked like a weirdo in front of his classmates. As Kubo continues to ask questions, he learns that Shiraishi has never been asked anything in class, which to him is one of the few advantages of being invisible. So, to continue with his plan to make our hero the protagonist of the class, he devises a plan. When the teacher is explaining the class, he asks if anyone knows the answer and Kubo raises her hand, but instead of answering herself, she assures that Shiraishi knows the answer. So now the teacher and all his classmates are waiting for what the invisible boy will say, since they do not know if it is intelligent or not. Embarrassed, but left with no other choice, Shiraishi gets up from his bench and assures his friend that he doesn't know the answer, but Kubo shows him the correct answer and the boy repeats it out loud, looking good in front of his class. Then, Kubo reveals to Shiraishi that it was all a plan for him to be present in the class. Just at that moment, the teacher calls the girl back to answer question 5, the only question she doesn't know how to answer. Fortunately, Shiraishi has his back and gives him the correct answer. At the end of the class, Kubo asks our protagonist if he has the Pine social network, and before he can answer, Kubo's friends approach her to go out for tea together. When Kubo turns his head towards Shiraishi, he manages to notice angrily that he has already left. Another day, both boys accidentally meet in the park, which surprises them because it is not normal for them to meet on their days off. Then Shiraishi tells him that he went shopping when he saw a man handing out free tissues and wanted to test how far he would have to go to get some, but after being invisible for a long time, the easiest thing to do was to go up and ask for it. After his anecdote, Kubo tries to take a picture of Shiraishi with his cell phone, but the camera seems not to take our protagonist's face. So, against what Shiraishi wants, as usual, Kubo makes different attempts to see when the camera will take his friend's face. Finally, she approaches the boy to take a selfie, and after a first failed attempt she gets even closer, which makes Shiraishi uncomfortable. But Kubo succeeds, because at that point the camera does capture both faces and she manages to take the picture. Then, he takes advantage of that moment to ask Shiraishi for his pine since he wants to send her the selfie, and adds that one day they should go out somewhere together. This makes our protagonist nervous, who doesn't really know how to respond, but ends up accepting. Finally, the two boys add up on Pine and she sends him her selfie, promising that for once she would have mercy on him and not make him do ridiculous things. That same night, Shiraishi is alone in his room thinking that this is the first time he has managed to exchange contact with a classmate, but surely Kubo won't talk to him anymore because he just wanted to send him that photo. However, at that moment a message from the girl arrives. For his part, Kubo is in his room happy that Shiraishi is answering his messages and so quickly. Episode 2. Shiraishi is in class and he is sleepy at that time, so he wonders if he will be able to take a nap in class, since being invisible no one will notice him. However, he begins to doubt because now his bank partner, Kubo, could notice it. Before he can answer himself, he looks to the left and notices that Kubo is also falling asleep in class, which he finds strange since she never does that. Later, our protagonist is totally tired after gym class, because it seems that he should make better time than his classmates and shout when he reaches the finish line because otherwise they won't notice. When he is lamenting all that he has to do because of his invisibility, Kubo appears in the hallway, having also left the girls' gym class. After greeting each other, Shiraishi realizes that he is sweating and walks away from Kubo, explaining why he doesn't want them to be so close. However, Kubo approaches and sniffs our protagonist's sweaty shirt directly and tells him that it doesn't bother her. But this only makes Shiraishi move away from his partner more quickly, as he tells himself that the way Kubo breaks the distance between them could cause damage to his heart as a man. Seeing this, Kubo walks away, promising he'll be back and asking him to wait for her. While she's gone, Shiraishi thinks that Kubo smells great despite having done gymnastics just like him. Plus, the ponytail she wears to exercise makes her even prettier than the loose hair she wears every day. While he is deep in these thoughts, Kubo appears with some refreshing wipes to clean Shiraishi's sweat, and so they are both clean. Kubo's friends appear to look for her, and the three leave for class. Once there, Kubo notices that on his desk are the wipes that he had lent to Shiraishi, and when he sees them there he smiles. Her friends notice this smile and begin to insist that she tell them what makes her so happy, but she refuses, as well as refusing to share her towels with her classmates because now she relates them directly to Shiraishi. At home, Shiraishi is excited because the release date for the latest volume of his favorite manga has finally arrived. When he is going to buy it, Kubo finds him standing in front of the automatic door that doesn't seem to open for him because the door doesn't notice his presence either. After several failed attempts by the boy to enter, Kubo approaches Shiraishi and helps him enter the comic book store. Once there, Shiraishi finds the manga he was looking for and Kubo is happy and touched by his companion's joy at seeing the manga he was looking for. Seeing him so happy, Kubo decides that he will start reading that same manga, but in the comic book store they have all the volumes except the first, so the girl insists that Shiraishi lend her the first volume. Nervous, our protagonist agrees to lend him the manga, but when they decide to go their separate ways, they realize that they are both heading in the same direction. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Kubo convinces Shiraishi to go to his house now to borrow the manga, instead of having to wait until the next day. Thus, both boys go to Shiraishi's house, and he decides to lend him the first 3 volumes so that Kubo decides if he wants to continue reading the others or not. After he hands him the manga, Kubo brings up that they live only 5 minutes away from each other, and tries to find out what time Shiraishi leaves his house, so he can meet him on the way to school. The next day, Kubo wakes up earlier than usual and starts getting ready for school, even deciding to use his sister's perfume. While they are having having breakfast, her sister manages to notice that Kubo is dressed up more than usual and asks the girl if she likes someone, but she denies it. Then Kubo notices that it's almost 8 a.m. when Shiraishi leaves for school, and he runs out to meet him on the way. Kubo rushes and arrives before Shiraishi, so he waits for him to surprise him and make the meeting seem accidental. On the way, Shiraishi comments that this is the first time he has walked to school with someone, since until then he always did it alone. Kubo is a little sad because our protagonist hasn't noticed that she's more dressed up than usual. Since they are running out of time, Kubo proposes to Shiraishi to sit down and talk in the park, and they do so. After a few minutes, Kubo's friends appear and talk to her, without noticing that our protagonist is sitting next to him, until Kubo names him, and only then do they manage to see him. Observing that Kubo is accompanied by her friends, Shiraishi decides to leave so as not to disturb. Back from school, our protagonist continues to lament about being invisible to everyone. At one point, a car, which didn't see our protagonist either, drives over a puddle of water and fills Shiraishi with mud. At that moment, the boy is glad to be invisible because he will be able to walk home without being embarrassed by the dirt, but then Kubo catches up with him from behind and tells him between laughs that she has seen everything. Embarrassed, Shiraishi states that he should take a bath when he gets home, and the two boys walk together to our protagonist's house. Once there they say goodbye, but when Kubo has left, our protagonist manages to realize that he has lost the key to his house, so he starts knocking on the door to see if someone opens it. Kubo, who had made little progress, hears a strange noise and approaches Shiraishi to find out what has happened. Then he tells her that he doesn't have the key and that his family will only be here in 2 hours, so he plans to wash himself in the park. Hearing this, and worried about the cold of December, Kubo proposes to Shiraishi that they can go to his house so he can take a bath with hot water. A little doubtful, our star accepts the offer. Once at Kubo's house, the girl directs him to the bathroom, where Shiraishi accidentally sees Kubo's underwear in the laundry basket. After the awkward moment, Kubo hands Shiraishi a towel and lends him his sportswear. Once he has come out of the bath, Shiraishi tells him that he will return his clean clothes and thanks him for what he has done for him, but he can go now as his mother has arrived at the house. Kubo then proposes that she dry her hair before leaving, otherwise she will catch a cold on the way. The boy does so and goes home, blushing at the whole situation. Chapter 3. The day after what happened at Kubo's house, both boys meet at school and Shiraishi returns the clean clothes to his classmate, thanking her for lending them to him. Then Kubo asks our protagonist if his clothes are too small, and upon hearing an affirmative answer, he asks how tall he is. When Shiraishi answers his height of 1.66, Kubo replies that she is 1.60 and then stands on the ladder, 1 step taller than him, saying that the perfect height difference between couples is 15 centimeters. Shiraishi nervous, and he wonders why Kubo is behaving like this all of a sudden, but the girl interrupts his thoughts to ask him if he would like to be taller, and to ensure that she likes that they are more or less at the same height. Then, before leaving, he tells him that he is joking, but despite this, Shiraishi finds himself very embarrassed by the conversation. At school it is the last day of classes of the semester and winter is getting colder. Once the exams are over, Shiraishi quickly leaves the class as he has plans and can't waste another second in that place, which makes Kubo a little sad, who is hoping to spend more time with him. After Shiraishi has left, Kubo meets with her friends to talk about how they did on the exam, but the girl continues to worry about her friend. Later, we see Shiraishi's little brother, Seda, playing with the snow in the park. Then a lady who is passing sees him playing alone, worries and approaches the child to warn him that it is not safe for a child to be there alone. But then Shiraishi speaks to comment that he was taking care of him, and then, for the first time, the woman sees him in front of her eyes, and apologizes for not noticing and intruding. As Seda continues playing and making snowballs, he thanks his brother for taking him to the park so they can play. Shiraishi tells him that it's nothing, but inside he's a little worried that people will think that the boy is alone in the park, because that could lead to trouble. While he is deep in these thoughts, a voice from behind calls his attention. It is Kubo, who has found him in the park and is surprised that Shiraishi is such a good big brother. Later, Seda greets Kubo and asks for the drink the girl is holding. Despite Shiraishi's scolding towards his brother, Kubo gives him his drink as he hasn't opened it yet, and Seda thanks him by hugging her, and then offers him a drink, which causes a lot of tenderness in Kubo. Then, Seda also offers Shiraishi a drink, and despite the fact that he does not want to, the child begins to cry, so our protagonist has no choice but to accept. However, he only pretends to drink from the bottle to make his brother happy. Seeing this, and once Seda has gone off to play, Kubo asks Shiraishi why he has faked it, assuming he is embarrassed by an indirect kiss for sharing the same body. bottle. Without answering the question, and embarrassed, our protagonist walks away to play with Seda. Later, in his room, Shiraishi is glad to be cooped up at home reading manga on such a cold day. However, he decides to go to a store far from his home to buy the new volume of his manga, as the cover is embarrassing and he doesn't want anyone to see him wearing it. Once in the bookstore, he comes across an adult magazine and takes advantage of his invisibility to take a look at it. But at that moment Kubo's sister appears, who also manages to see our protagonist and interrupts his recognition, making him nervous. In his defense, the boy says that someone left it behind and was about to return it, and proceeds to buy his sleeve. At that moment, Shiraishi realizes that for the first time in his life a store clerk has seen him and is having a conversation with him. Then he reads the name Kubo on his uniform and is surprised, but without drawing any further conclusions. Anyway, he hurries up his purchase and leaves. When he manages to leave the store, Shiraishi forgets his student notebook and Kubo's sister takes it to her to return it, as she manages to read that they go to the same institute. When he manages to realize that Kubo knows the boy, he tells him about the adult magazine, and this seems to depress Kubo, since his body is different from that of those magazines. The next day, Kubo gives Shiraishi his notebook and tells him that his sister has found it. Only at that moment, and after some awkward questions, our protagonist manages to realize that the girl from the comic book store was Kubo's sister. Nervous then, he tries to explain the misunderstanding to his friend, but she gives him the student's notebook and leaves. At night, Kubo talks with his sister about his Christmas plans and Kubo shows that he doesn't have any plans yet. The next day at school, Kubo reminds Shiraishi of his promise to go out together one day and organizes a meeting 2 weeks later at the train station, to which our protagonist agrees because he never has any plans. But then the boy manages to notice that that day is Christmas and he doesn't understand what is happening. On the day of the meeting, Shiraishi is so nervous that he arrives half an hour early for the meeting, but he shouldn't wait that long because Kubo also arrives 10 minutes early. However, the girl notices Shiraishi's cold hands and feels bad for making him wait so long. Kubo then gives Shiraishi a Christmas present, hoping to exchange gifts, but Shiraishi hasn't bought him anything. Then the girl tells Shiraishi that he has 15 minutes to get a gift, so they make the exchange, so he runs off. After going around a few shops and exceeding his time, Shiraishi begins to think that Kubo's hands will be frozen from waiting for him, and he finally gets some beautiful gloves as a gift, which Kubo blushing appreciates. When Shiraishi opens his gift, he finds that it is a yellow shirt with the main phrase written in the middle, and Kubo wants to change his gift because now he is a bit embarrassed by his. However, Shiraishi thanks him because he really didn't expect to have any Christmas presents, and just having a present makes him very happy. Chapter 4. At home, Shiraishi sees how Seda is deeply obsessed with a TV series, Poodle Man, and wonders if the child doesn't get bored of always doing the same thing, since he's already been watching television for 2 hours imitating the movements of the main character. After 2 hours of watching the show, Seda is totally excited and his mother asks Shiraishi to take him outside to play. Although our protagonist doesn't really want to, his mother convinces him by saying that if he takes him out to play, they'll eat hamburgers that night. Outside, Shiraishi accepts that after watching the program with his brother for so long, he has learned the movements, so he plays with Seda in the park, taking advantage of the fact that they are alone. However, after a while, Kubo appears and records a video of them playing around and doing the transformation moves, which deeply embarrasses Shiraishi. Although she insists that they continue with their game, our protagonist remains immobilized and says that he will not. At school, Shiraishi laments because when he woke up in a hurry that morning he had put on 2 socks of different lengths, but fortunately, in gym class no one has noticed since they haven't even noticed him. In class, Kubo and her friends talk about Valentine's Day, since the celebration is only a few days away. While watching them talk, Shiraishi loses himself looking at Kubo and tells himself that today the girl is different than usual. As she wonders what's wrong with her friend, class starts without her realizing it. There, the teacher asks Kubo to help him paste some brochures, and she takes the opportunity to ask our protagonist for help. Although Shiraishi wants to help her, he is afraid that she will discover his mismatched socks, but Kubo ends up noticing them anyway. As the girl posts an ad, Shiraishi manages to realize that what seemed strange about her friend that day was that she was wearing long stockings. Unfortunately, she says the latter out loud and Kubo turns around in surprise. This embarrasses Shiraishi but pleasantly surprises the girl, as he has noticed a change in her, however small, plus it means he has been looking at her legs. After playing with his partner and making him uncomfortable, Kubo decides to continue his work. While they are at it, the girl asks our protagonist if he has ever had a refillable drink, and when he answers that he has, Kubo gets excited and asks him to go with her to go have those drinks, since he never does. Has tried. Kubo excited, takes time to decide what to order, and ends up proposing to Shiraishi that they order 2 different drinks and then share. But despite the fact that our protagonist has already done it with his brother, the fact that Kubo proposes it makes him nervous, so he declines the offer and instead asks for a meat bun. After serving her drink, with the help of Shiraishi, the girl feels very happy since it is the first time she has had a refillable glass. Our protagonist, surprised, sees the happiness on his partner's face and can't believe it's the first time she's done that, because she seems like the kind of girl who can do anything. On the way, Kubo asks Shiraishi for a bite of his meat bun, and while the boy is thinking of cutting a piece for him, Kubo eats straight from the bun, then insists Shiraishi finish his meal before it runs out. Cool. Finally, both separate and each one goes their own way, but Shiraishi is mesmerized thinking about the previous situation because he still can't believe that Kubo ate directly from his meat bun. Valentine's Day is coming up, and it's a holiday where girls give boys chocolate and sometimes even confess their love for him. For this reason, the boys take advantage of the proximity of the festivity to be kinder to the women and see if they can get any chocolate. When Shiraishi arrives at school that day, he realizes that it is Valentine's Day as he sees that all the men at school are nervous. However, our protagonist is calm because for him it is an ordinary day, since he is invisible and not even the teachers pay attention to him. While thinking this, Shiraishi reaches under the desk and hears a strange noise. When he bends down to see what is happening, he manages to notice that there is a heart-shaped chocolate under his desk. Unbelievable, our protagonist spends a long time looking at it from different angles and still does not realize what is happening, because he thinks that someone forgot his candy under the wrong table. He also thinks someone has the wrong bank, or that they have done it out of commitment. When the idea that the chocolate is from Kubo crosses his mind, he bangs himself against the desk to get that idea out of his head. At that moment, the girl appears, who asks him if he is okay or if he has hurt himself. After an awkward moment, Shiraishi proposes to ask Kubo if she has given him the chocolate, but seeing her directly in the eyes, he goes into a crisis and only manages to talk about the weather. Later, it is the girl who brings up the subject and asks Shiraishi if he has ever been given a chocolate. Given the boy's negative response, she looks pleased and replies that perhaps someone has left a chocolate under his desk, making a clear reference to the fact that she was the one who left that sweet there. After wishing him to enjoy it, since it seems to be done with a lot of effort, Kubo blushes. But Shiraishi, who hasn't realized what's happening, only replies that he thinks they've got the wrong bank. Without another word, Kubo tells him that the chocolate on his desk is for him and leaves. Shiraishi keeps wondering whose gift it will be. Then we are shown that the day before, Kubo made a big purchase to be able to cook those chocolates, which surprises his sister, since all the previous years Kubo only bought the made chocolates, in addition to not being very good at cooking. However, looking for the recipes on the internet, Kubo begins the preparation. Unfortunately, the chocolates end up being ugly and looking worse than they taste. But Kubo is not going to give up and wants to keep trying, so his sister manages to realize that it is to give to a boy. Then he proposes to help her, and Kubo, following in the footsteps of his sister Akina, manages to make some chocolate cookies that, despite tasting good, are a bit deformed. Despite this, her sister convinces her that they are made with love and that is what counts, which leaves Kubo agreeing that it is decided to deliver them the next day at school. At home, Shiraishi tastes the cookie and says it's delicious, but continues to wonder who gave it to him.